So I'm just going to start alphabetically as we're listed in the program. Each panelist is going to talk about their own work, and then we're going to open it up for questions. So we're going to start with Donald Boesch, who is a professor of marine science and president of the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, which operates 4 research laboratories throughout the state. He also serves as Vice Chancellor for Environmental Sustainability for the University System of Maryland.
Great, thanks, Matt. My first experience in science communication through the media was as a young faculty member, and who was interviewed and had a quote that I felt got it wrong, and I was very embarrassed because it showed me up to my peers and my superiors, and so I vowed never again to talk to the press, right? So needless to say, that promise wasn't kept very long, because I got into a situation where I assumed a leadership role in a nascent academic organization in my home state of Louisiana. And if you think of a challenge of communicating science, think of that. And one of the things where I gained a lot of experience is I was the person who kind of mobilized the effort that led to the discovery of what's now called the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. And actually, it was a very young journalist who came up with the name dead zone, which is now, Wikipedia'd and cited around the world. And he was thinking Stephen King, when I was explaining this thing to him. And of course, I said, no, it's not all dead in it, but there's a lot of microbes, but he helped simplify the message in a very powerful way. So I learned from that. I'll come back to that in a minute. I moved to Maryland 23 years ago to head a larger organization. I've got a faculty of about 85 people. It's also an interesting organization because it's a separate autonomous institution within our university system. So I'm the CEO and ultimately responsible for the behavior and work of these faculty members and their promotion and tenure. So if we can change the rules, I should be able to do it, right? Well, I was taken by something I read early at the time. A report had just come out around that time, and it was produced by Carnegie Institution for Higher Education, and it was trying to talk about the new model for universities, where we got away from this traditional 3-legged stool that some people mentioned earlier of research, service, and teaching, to talk about it in more multiple, complex, and action-oriented dimensions. So Ernest Boyer was the leader of this effort, and he talked about the 4 dimensions of scholarship in universities being discovery. That is, it's an outcome, not research, which is an activity. Integration, that is the responsibility of every scholar, really, to integrate their specialized knowledge with a broader range of knowledge. Application, which is different than service, because we asked faculty members to list their service. They listed how many meetings they went to internally and things of that sort, whereas application it's a clear definition of actually taking that knowledge after it's integrated and actually putting it to good use for humankind, and of course teaching. And so we put in place this as our requirements for review and promotion. And I have to say, it's had some effect, but not nearly as transformative effect as I had hoped, because we are still members of tribes, our faculty, and they still value their status within the broader community of scholars, where the coin of the realm is high-impact publications. So it is true even in our situation that one can't be promoted and can't succeed without excellence in research or discovery, as we now call it. The other thing which is interesting about my position is that my organization is valued and is funded by the state of Maryland, not so much from how many students we train or educate, or even how many papers we publish, but what we do for the citizens of the state, for the good of the state, and helping them manage resources using scientific knowledge. So when I go before the General Assembly, they're not interested in all those statistics. They're interested in how are the oysters doing or how are the crabs doing and so on. So it really is necessary that we have a communication strategy that helps understand the impact and the use, practical use of the knowledge we produce. One of the things I did to help elevate and celebrate this idea of the responsibility of our scholars to apply their knowledge is I give a big deal award every year. Keep it a secret right until the end and have it at our big faculty convocation and celebrate the activity of a particular faculty member who's been particularly very effective in this realm. And it's actually had a very positive effect on our community. Well, the other thing which is unusual about my job is that I actually sit at the councils of government in our state. By tradition, and now by law actually, I or whoever's in my position serves on our governor's Bay cabinet, which is like an environmental sub-cabinet, and I'm the only member of that body who's not a political appointee of the governor. So my job is to be there and help them understand the science, help them act on it, so that gives me an interesting, effective role. Having said that, you know, the way knowledge is transferred to action in policymaking is seldom a linear model from the scientist speaking to the technical person in an agency or a company on up the chain of command to the ultimate decision maker, because decision makers at the end get their information like almost everyone else does in our society. They get it through the media. And so going back to my earlier reference to the dead zone, I had an experience where our governor at the time happened to be a university professor by training, and he actually read, he had briefing books all earmarked with notes, was at a meeting with him, and he turned to the rest of the senior officers in state government. I happened to be sitting next to him, and he said, well, did you know there was this dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, which is just like we're having in the Chesapeake Bay? So he connected in a way that, from a political leader, that he had a shared experience in that, and he didn't know that I had been responsible in some way for this, not for the phenomenon, but for the understanding of the phenomenon. The other thing we've done institutionally is we discovered that faculty members are reluctant to spend a lot of time on communicating their knowledge and results because they see it as a time sink. And I think there was a number of references to that, to the time management. So we created what we call now, going back to the Boyer four legs of scholarship, Integration and Application Network, which is all about bringing the science, helping it become integrated, and then helping it be applied in a way that relieves a lot of the time cost for individual faculty members. So we hold workshops, not these endless meetings where everyone and their brother talks, but very focused efforts to try to address a particular problem. We're very mindful and respectful of the time investment and keep it to a minimum and help the scholars bring their work forward. We've also created a communications office like many of our institutions have, but the guiding principle in this office is that it's first and foremost about public education. If we can get institutional recognition as a result of our educating the public, so much to good. But we don't just put things out there for our own reputation. We do it fundamentally from the standpoint of public communication. As an institutional leader, it's meant that I've had to set an example, try to anyway, and it's also meant that I've tried to be working with the media, since I thought that was very important. So those key reporters in this region have me on speed dial. I return their calls, and I help them frame stories and understand issues. Often, in fact, predominantly, never get cited myself, but to help them think this thing through and point them to the right experts. It's particularly useful for us being located in the greater Washington area, because I can't tell you how many times that I've seen senior officials, members of Congress, high-level cabinet level or sub-cabinet level people who said, oh yes, I know you. I read something you said in the Washington Post, because this is their morning newspaper. So we've tried to use that effectively. And finally, let me just say, in terms of my own path and career, I've served on a large number of National Research Council committees, and in recent years, particularly ones about climate change, and came from them with the idea that this is a long-term challenge that we have, and that I needed to spend more time and show more leadership in the area of education, working with young people. So we are actually setting about in our state and in Delaware, partnership with Delaware, to make sure that all of our students get experience about the basic science underpinning climate change throughout their school experience, and do it in a way that isn't a sort of a separate activity, because it wouldn't be done, but do it through the evolution of science education, next generation science standards, and in our state's environmental literacy requirements to make a long-lasting impact onto the future. And then finally, let me just say, you can teach old dogs new tricks, so some of my friends have helped me kind of learn to communicate through Twitter, so I'm out there tweeting as well. My own style and my own interest is to basically note things that I think of interesting that within the area of my coverage and expertise. And I've been able to attract is about not thousands of people, but some really key people in terms of reporters who are following. I wonder what Don's thinking about this and what he's seeing. And it's really had a major effect on influencing folks who communicate knowledge to a broader group of people. And also in a way that I'm not just communicating, tweeting about our own stuff, my own stuff, or those of my institution, but broadly about what I think is relevant and important. So anyway, that's some tips and experience.
Thanks, Don. Our next panelist is Rick Borchelt, who's Director of Communications and Public Affairs at the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of Science. He's had a varied career in science communications and public policy, including stints as Media Relations Director for the National Academy of Sciences, Press Secretary for the U.S. House of Representatives, Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, and Special Assistant for Public Affairs. And, well, he's worn many hats in Washington, D.C. and beyond, so I'll just hand it over to Rick here.